podcast. Now, we normally do comics, movies, TV, and pop culture. One of the aspects of pop culture that I love is music. I'm a big music guy. I've been in bands for a long time. Actually, Hassan and I wrote the music to our theme song that you hear very often. As such, I also do a lot of freelance work for AM New York, and I get to interview awesome musicians, some of which appear on the Secrets of the Sire podcast, and some of which are now going to be displayed here on the Sire Spotlight. Anyway, without further ado, I give you Billy Corgan.
So speaking of all the lineup changes that the Pumpkins have endured, with you kind of essentially carrying on the mantle, when I heard you were releasing a solo record, my mind was kind of like, well, why not just make another Smashing Pumpkins record? But then heard the first single, and it kind of made sense, because the single is, it's just a completely different sound. So tell me about the solo record. Tell me why do a solo record, and how the sound is kind of is different than what you've done before.
Okay, well, I sort of reached the point. We're actually working on a follow-up to the last Pumpkins album, which was called Monuments to an Elegy.
Yep.
And about halfway through the record, I kind of lost my mind, and I thought, I can't do this anymore. I just ran out of gas on trying to do Smashing Pumpkins music, so I wrote a batch of songs that ended up being the foundation for this record. And I found that if I just let myself naturally go where I wanted to go, that it was more acoustic and less, whatever, future rock or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I ended up, this long winding road of working with Rick Rubin and making a somewhat stark solo record with no drums and putting it under my name. I mean, I'm with you on that. I sometimes I question my own sanity, because you get to a point in the world where it's like, there's this old saying, like, what's in a name? It's like, if I write the songs and I sing it and I call it Billy Corgan, or I call it Smashing Pumpkins, or I call it, the moon and the stars or something, it's sort of, at some point, it sort of doesn't feel any different to me, but people really perceive it differently. And so, but it just felt right, and I will say this and I mean this it's like a positive negative.
Mm-hmm.
I get tired of putting out Smashing Pumpkins music and then having to answer the question, well, why should we accept this as Pumpkins if it doesn't involve pick your band member, That gets old too. So I'm happy to just do something where it's like, it doesn't have any of that baggage, where it's just strictly, here's the songs I wrote, this is me, and if you like it, great.
No, it's a great segue into my other questions too. It seems like one of the things that in listening to the catalog through the 2000s and even a little bit of Monuments and a little bit of Oceana, although I think you kind of went back to a little bit, there was less of the quieter songs. Things like songs like Soma, which I loved, and even Mayonnaise on Siamese Dream. There was that quiet psychedelic rock, but then I heard the new single, and I'm like, oh, in a way it's not psychedelic rock. Don't get me wrong, I'm not confusing the two, obviously, but it seems a little more quieter, a little more intimate. Is that kind of like the vibe of the rest of the record? I've only heard the first single, so I'm just kind of.
Oh yeah. The record doesn't have any drums, so if you hear the first song that came out, which was Aeronaut, the whole rest of the record's kind of got a similar vibe. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, is that a conscious thing, or like you said, you just kind of lost your mind a little bit in terms of making Pumpkins and wanted to do something completely different?
Yeah. At the risk of sounding disingenuous, I mean, I think I do better if I just go where I'm interested musically, and I don't get involved intellectually about why something makes sense. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, actually, no, because I'm a musician and an artist, and I host a radio show and everything like that. And when we just have a good show, we just have a good show. There's nothing.
Yeah.
There's no formula to just do.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, it's like that's why I think the key moment for me in this part of my life is I was making a record called Smashing Pumpkins, and I just wasn't feeling it. So rather than say, I have to do this, or I should do it, or if I'm going to do it, it needs to sound like Siamese Dream 2, or, whatever this sort of intellectual overlay that you can put on an idea, I was like, no, I'm just going to go home and write some songs, and wherever those songs go, that's where I'll follow, and that's how I end up here.
Yeah. Talk to me about working with Rick Rubin on it. I read the briefing on it, and he was a powerful influence on this. And then also talk to me, how do you normally produce a record? Like, who do you normally work with, or is it usually self-produced? How do you go about that?
I'll go backwards first. Generally speaking, I've always been super involved in the production of the records, and somewhere along the way, I felt like I'd sort of learned enough where maybe I didn't need a producer as much as I did when I was younger, but that doesn't mean they didn't mightily contribute to whatever I did. In fact, they contributed more than me. But it's like going to college or something. At some point, you feel like, okay, I've taken enough classes. Now I want to kind of try this on my own. So for the last 10 years, I've primarily produced myself, although I've had help. But with this, when I talked to Rick about doing the record, and he said he was interested, I said, I'm just going to get out of the way and let you do your thing. I really just want to be an artist for a change. I don't want the additional pressure of being a producer. I'd rather just be the artist. Tell me when to show up. Let's agree on what songs we want to do, and I'll just do my best. And that's what I did.
And talk to me about the actual, the tracks on the albums. Like I said, I've only been able to hear the singles, so I'd love to learn more from your perspective, about the different tracks.
Yeah. Essentially, just did everything live as far as the basic tracks. So recorded either acoustic and vocal or piano and vocal. And then once we had the whole album as a sort of stark, stripped down version, then we started trying to do some overdubs. And then after that, just did a bunch of stuff like extra pianos. And it's very acoustic feeling. It ended up being that way. I think there's almost no electric guitar. There's some strings on there and some mellotron and stuff like that. So it's not completely outside of the range of things I would have done in the past as far as how I would overdub, but without the drums, obviously it feels a lot different.
How do you feel about yourself as a singer? I kind of look at you as just a total musician, and reading more and more about the work you did on Siamese Dream and Melancholy too. I got to interview different producers and stuff, and just people in general. Was Butch Vig on? Butch Vig was one of your producers, correct?
Yeah, Butch produced Gish and Siamese Dream.
Right. Okay. Great. So I did good. Okay. So I was able to interview Butch, and and he had mentioned too just how much you had kind of done yourself, and so really just from a musicianship level, the amount of respect I have for you as a musician. Your voice is a unique voice that you kind of crafted this particular sound. But how do you view yourself as a singer, and especially on an acoustic record, which is what you're kind of putting out now? I mean, is there any nervousness? Do you view yourself as a singer, or is there how do you approach it, and how do you feel about your own like singing voice and your own especially on a record as stripped down as this?
Well, it might be a strange way to answer the question. I think when you have a strange voice or an uncommon voice that you can't necessarily change into a normal voice, like it doesn't matter how hard I try to sing normal, I sing weird. I just do. So along the way, I think when I was younger, my way of dealing with those feelings was saying, I'm going to craft a kind of a personality like you would craft a guitar sound or something, and
sure.
I'll sing in that character. And then through the years, I realized that maybe I didn't need to do that as much, and that as I learned how to sing over time, then I had more control emotionally and technically over what I do. And now I don't have to think about it as much. But at the same time, I'm still aware that my voice is a strange instrument, and that not everybody understands it. And the only other data I have on top of that is the people who like my voice really do like my voice. Like there's something in the emotional quality of my voice that they really like.
Yeah.
It's that same quotient that also makes other people not like it. But it's nothing I have any control over. You know what I mean? It's not like I'm putting on a funny accent and singing in a funny accent and like Jerry Lewis or something like, oh, you know what I mean? There literally is no. Like the other night I went and saw Yes with Rick Wakeman and John Anderson, And John Anderson's voice, I mean, it was unbelievable. He sang like every song in the original key. He sounded phenomenal. I was astounded. But when you go talk to John, I talked to John Anderson for a minute after the show. It was very nice, and it was an honor to meet him. But he has a very strange voice. It's a one of a kind voice. There's only one guy in the world who sounds like John Anderson. And I'm talking to him, and I'm literally hearing that voice in conversation. And it's as weird as mine. I mean, it is what it is, And I heard people say the same thing about, the music's too weird and the voice is too well. That's the sound. I mean, for me as a fan, I love it. I wouldn't change a thing. So I kind of get that. I guess what I'm trying to say is I kind of get it, the best I can get it, but it's not like I have any control over it other than doing my best.
No, and I personally love it, but I agree with the answer. It's a unique sound for sure. Take me back to the early days of success for you. I heard a great interview you did. It was actually on the Dan Le Batard show on ESPN, and you were talking about, how conflicted you were that you were successful in making money, even though at the same time, as a band and as a musician, you want your music to be heard. You want success in that sense. I love just, kind of touching on that a little bit. If you can bring me back to those days.
Well, also too in the early 90s, the idea of integrity and selling out was like a really big issue to that generation. Sort of street cred authenticity, which of course now is completely manufactured.
Right.
And so to even try to bring people back to those times of innocence where, who you knew and what club you played and what label you're on signified something about your moral character. And unfortunately, for us as a band, we were, I know it sounds strange, but we grew up in kind of a bubble in Chicago, even though it's a major city. It was very disconnected from the music business. So because we didn't know anybody in New York and LA, and I don't mean just people in the music business, I'm talking about like the cool guy from the Village Voice or something. So when we showed up in the international corridors of media, LA, New York, London, Tokyo, we were literally aliens. We were like from another planet playing a style of music that they didn't understand. They didn't respect the resources or the influences. Like the fact that we were quoting Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, UFO, Cheap Trick, and 7 Seconds was beyond their pale. And we weren't checking the right boxes on the cool. You have the right influences list. Back then everyone would say, "Oh, I love Sonic Youth." It was like the standard answer you said to a music critic to let them know you were cool. And so because we offended those people, we immediately entered this weird buzzsaw of, well, who are you and what are you doing here and why are you piggybacking on our precious scene? And of course, you saw those same stresses and agendas put on Nirvana, Pearl Jam, 9 Inch Nails, Courtney Love, Hole. They all got the same thing. We just got a particular version of it. So it was hard to reconcile this weird story of like, wow, all 4 of us grew up working class. We all grew up, sort of basically middle class or lower. None of us had, rich parents or anything like that. None of us went to an expensive school. And suddenly we're thrust into this bigger conversation about culture and integrity, and we're getting lectured by people who went to Ivy League schools. It's very strange. It's a very strange position to be in, because even if they're right about their snobbiness, they're not right about what it really means to come from the street, which we did. They didn't recognize the street we came from. It wasn't on their fucking map. Excuse my French.
I also love, in that same thing, you kind of just talk about, EDM stars and even like the Kardashians, and you're very unapologetic. They're doing something unique, and I kind of adopted that mantra too, because for years I think growing up in the 90s, that's exactly what you kind of explained it very succinctly. It's the selling out quotient, and people kind of are angry at the Kardashians because they make millions of dollars. They don't do anything, but what they do is they do something, and they do it really well, and that's something you kind of touched upon before.
Yeah, I think we're long past the time of judging how people gain success in the culture. I mean, you can be very derogatory about it, or you can be very celebratory about it. But the fact of the matter is there really is no difference in American culture anymore between what used to be considered highbrow and lowbrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Punk rock songs are used in telephone commercials. You see celebrities who are really, really big celebrities routinely slumming to sort of gain some sort of credibility, with the masses, so that they think that they're down with the people.
Yeah.
There's just it's such a blur that unless you're let's call it a daily observer and commentator on the culture as it exists, parachuting in and out and making the occasional comment is sort of worthless, because you just can't keep up with that jet stream anyway. And you know what? It's not going to slow anybody down either.
Yeah. Yep. One of the other things too you're very outspoken about is social media and how dangerous it can be. For me, it's censorship. That's the thing that I'm as an artist, I'm personally always concerned about. I'm concerned about not being able, to express yourself in a logical or intelligent way without being shot down because your opinion doesn't jive. And that's something you've kind of addressed before as well too.
Well, I think even though it's a very quiet subject on the bigger radar at the moment, I think free speech is probably the number one issue in our country.
Mm-hmm.
It's strange because we have some really, really big issues in our country right now, it's not to diminish them in any way. But my argument would be, very simply speaking, as an artist, that as long as free speech is protected in this country, all the other ills in our society will be taken care of. Mm-hmm. More efficiently and more quickly, with more people participating in the process.
Yeah.
And when you try to silence people, however repugnant you find their opinions or their views, you're only delaying the amount of time it's going to take to get them on board if you are on the right side of the street with a particular issue. Shutting people down and silencing them and alienating them doesn't actually make them agree with you. In fact, it makes them want to resist you just on the face of the argument that you are not taking their opinion into account. In American society, if you can step back from the hyperbolic atmosphere that we have in our culture now, which, it is what it is, American society is actually incredibly tolerant. We tolerate, and I mean this in a very wide sense of the word, we tolerate an incredible, diverse set of opinions, cultures, styles. We are, arguably the most progressive country in the history of mankind. And we've done it in a very short time. In terms of historical arcs, we've moved very quickly and we've been very influential in the world. And so I trust that as long as we keep free speech at the center of our power as a country, we'll be fine, even though we're going to go through tough times. And maybe some of those tough times are warranted because we want to get to a better place, and it's going to be, sort of like the old saying, take a step back before you take a step forward. It feels right now we're taking some steps back, but maybe hopefully we will take a step forward. But I'm utterly convinced that free speech is the most critical right in American society. And the minute you start diminishing that, and you see it happening daily, it is no longer a conspiracy theory. When you see the curtailment of free speech, particularly by corporate interests, who don't really care about the American Republic as much as they care about their bottom line and making sure they don't get attacked by some interest group. When you see that, and it's a daily story, that should alarm everybody, but it hasn't reached that level of alarm yet.
Very well said. You've been very generous with your time, so I only have 2 more questions, and I really appreciate it. The obligatory is, there's rumors of a original lineup Smashing Pumpkins reunion. Is there anything that you could talk about with regards to that?
Generally, there's been a lot of poking around. I'm hopeful, and hopefully it will happen, but I can't say for sure it will, and I can't say it won't. The good news is that the issues that were in the way, which really were more personal than professional, a lot of those have been sort of sorted out the last few years very quietly between particularly me and some of the ex-band members. So I'm very happy with that. I mean, I have peace in my life in a way that I hadn't had for a lot of years, and that, that even, James is on this record, and unfortunately I haven't heard the song, but there's a song in this record that James plays on,
Okay.
To have James and Darcy particularly back in my life is a great thing. So whether or not we play, if we play, how we play, where we play, what we play, that is all totally secondary to me, beyond the fact that we have, it's this reestablishment of the relationships, because that's really what drove the music in the first place.
Sure. Wow, well, that's great news, and I'd love to, I hope it keeps progressing in a way that we get to hear. We get to hear some music out of you guys. Last question, this is a pop culture podcast after all, so I have to we focus on superhero movies and comic books and things like that. Are you into any of the comic book movies or the Comic-Con scene? Did you read comics as a kid? What kind of pop culture do you consume?
I was a big, huge Marvel fan as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Loved Iron Man and a lot of other stuff, and through the years have even collected old vintage Marvel stuff. As far as the comic book movies, I can't do it anymore. They lost me about Iron Man 1. I think that was my last. I get it in the sense that I really think it's awesome. And somebody who grew up in the like I went to Star Wars the day it came out. The original 1977 version. So as somebody who grew up in an era that saw the dawn of what is now the modern version of that, and how it went through like a terrible time in the 90s, and it's made this incredible comeback, and to see what Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and all them built, even the Batman stuff. It's really cool as a fan, but I think that the economic part of the movie business interest, in terms of how it's influenced those movies to where they feel less original. I will say, though, to not sound completely like a negative guy, I thought the Doctor Strange movie that came out, I guess it would have been out about a year ago, I thought that was really now this is somebody that's actually doing something different, and this feels right to me as a fan of that character. I thought that was really awesome. But overall, like the third, fourth, fifth Spider-Man reboot, super CGI, I can't do it anymore, and maybe I'm showing my age, but they kind of lost me along the way on that. Because I will say this real quickly, and I'm saying it as a fan because I know you have people, and I don't want to be that guy. I'm not being a hater. What if you go back and read the original Marvels, what was really attractive was that there was always a sense that in amongst the superpower stuff was a friendship and camaraderie and kind of a piss take on modern culture, kind of making the sarcasm was always kind of part of the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And I think when it gets too CGI, too over the top, too ridiculous, I think an old school fan like me feels a little bit like, this isn't really why I'm into this stuff.
Yeah.
And I go back, and real quickly, I'll go back to the first Star Wars movie. You go back and the special effects are a bit soggy and stuff, but the relationships in that movie are so strong. And the way those characters seem to bond together in a particular way, that's what makes the movie so special.
Yeah.
So as long as you always have that, I think the other stuff is the cool part. But if you miss the relationship part, like in the Fantastic Four, if you don't have that relationship, it's just another movie. And these days, anybody can make those movies. I mean, there's so many CGI movies, it's like you lose count.
Sure. Real quick, that's not you in Small Wonder, right? And how many times have you gotten asked that?
Oh, Jesus Christ! If I could reach the phone and strangle you, I would. And I will say though, to carry the joke on, that joke went on for a while. God knows how it started. It was like a weird urban myth rumor, and then it turned into Manson. So somehow he started getting it. And I've been with Manson when people have come up to him and asked him if he was the kid in Small Wonder.
Oh my gosh!
So somehow the urban myth of me, it was me, turned into Manson. So I'm very happy to say it is him, and you can ask him about it next time you talk to him.
Billy, this has been an absolute delight. I really, like I said, been a huge fan for a long time, and just rekindled my fandom into your music the last, 3-4 years or so. So it's been just really great timing, and I'm looking forward to the solo record and trying to score tickets to the show as well too.
All right, that was Billy Corgan. Thank you guys if you're stuck around this long, please subscribe to us if you're watching us on YouTube. Please hit the subscribe button. That's great. We're going to be doing this every week. Like I said, had a little interruption with some new baby stuff, which is fun. Kind of fun little thing, re-listening to that interview too, though, hearing him talk about Darcy and his life, so it's interesting how that went from being like, hey, we're going to get the full band to we're not going to get the full band. So very, very curious as to what went down, but we'll have to see. We'll have to take someone's word for it. Next week, I'm going to run the Ed Kowalczyk interview in full. This is a long interview. It's about 30 minutes. And the Chad interview from the drummer from Live. So both of these took place before they got reunited, when Ed was doing a solo thing and Live was doing their replacement with Chris Shin as the lead singer. And I'll give you my review of the new Live record. So it's kind of cool. I enjoy doing this. If I can talk with some people who dig the kind of music I dig, then it's great. I've got interviews with Atlas Genius. I got an interview with Chris Cornell, which I think you can check out on the YouTube page already, but I'll rerun it as a spotlight at some point before he passed away. We'll talk about the stuff that they're re-releasing for him. We're going to talk, I'm doing an interview with Macy Gray today, which is pretty cool, so that will be up in a couple months as well, too. We have Young the Giant. We have Craig Finn from Hold Steady. I mean, I've got such a library of these great interviews, so really, really excited to break them out for you guys. So, all right, check out our regular show. It is Wednesday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern, talkradio.nyc, and there we go. See you guys later.